Neck-throughs, guitars, they're like a guy that you won't have a beer with you.
I want to hear what's pushing the notes.
Freddie King and B.B. King, Albert King, and let's not forget Burger King.
I don't want to blow my knuckle out.
Stainless steel is the work of the devil.
These go to 11.
From the East Amplification Tone Labs in Baltimore, Maryland, it's the Amps and Axes Show with your hosts, Jeff the Godfather of Low Wattage Amps Bober and Mick Marcelino.
Well, good day to you, Mr. Bober.
Good day to you, Mr. Marcelino. How be you?
Oh, it is being something else, man. We can't thank the listeners enough. The Greg Koch show went off, and you guys have responded immensely. So thank you very much for that, man.
Yeah. You told me that it kind of it went off, and then it went off the charts.
A lot of love came in on that bad boy.
Awesome.
We got
thank you, listeners, and thank you, Greg.
Yeah, and we got a bunch of submissions to our comments page. Saying, thank you for having him on, and they wish that we could have him on every week.
Yeah, there were some funny ones there, man. But it was like God. Everybody really enjoyed that show. So thank you all, and thank you, Greg.
Yeah, man. He was, and that is not an act. I want to make sure everybody understands. We have been, Jeff and I, last year at NAMM, we were in a room with him alone. And that is his personality. It does not change. And when we were prior to recording, he was exactly the same mode. The guy never deviated from that, man.
It's just who he is.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
It is. It's awesome.
Hey, so I wanted to tell you, speaking of NAMM, when we were walking around, we met this guy. Now, Brandon, who worked for you, Brandon Marlin.
Yes.
He knew a lot of people out there because he was your West Coast representative.
Right.
So a nice shout out to Brandon because we haven't talked to him in a while.
Great.
And
working on movies now.
Yeah. How about that?
Yeah.
And we're walking along, and he sees this guy. He's an older gentleman. And he goes, man, you got to meet this guy. So his name is Billy Gray, right? Yep. Now, Billy Gray has one hell of a past, man. This guy was in the movie. He appeared in the movie Lost in Space. Or no, I'm sorry, The Day the Earth Stood Still. He was a kid, but he was in the movie. Mm-hmm. And he was also a flat track motorcycle dirt track racer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, these are the motorcycles that don't have brakes. Okay, they're a Harley. Sometimes they're a 1-cylinder, sometimes they're 2 cylinders, depending upon the the size category. Mm-hmm. There's no brakes on these bikes. They just got a big back tire, a little tiny front tire. They're sideways for most of the race, mm-hmm. and these guys are just this side of insane with speed and just cojones like you wouldn't believe.
Just Evel Knievel kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah, a little bit. So, he was standing there and he had these pins. He had these bridge pins, but they were really funky looking. They didn't look normal. And then he
acoustic bridge pins.
Yes, I'm sorry, acoustic bridge pins.
I don't know if there are any other bridge pins. So I just want to say that they didn't look like any other acoustic bridge pin that I'd ever seen.
No. So he sold me a set, and because I was convinced. So he sold me a set, and I sat on these things for a year because I wanted to get locking tuners for my. I told the guy at the store, I said, I'm the laziest guitar player on the planet. I said, so if I don't have to wind a string, if I don't have to do anything except for just put it on the guitar and turn the knob, I'm good. Mm-hmm. So I got these Spurzl locking gears,
for your acoustic.
For my acoustic, I have a jig that allows me to, place the pin in the correct position so they all line up right. And I put them all on,
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, wait a minute. I've got these power pins. I'm going to put this thing on the guitar. So you pull all your normal pins out and you do whatever you want with them. And then there's a plate that goes actually inside the guitar underneath the bridge, the bridge block there. And then you've got this, I don't even know what, it's like it's just basically a retainer. The ball goes in at the top of the guitar. It doesn't go in the guitar anymore.
Right. And in the lower side, the string is inserted through this pin. The pin goes through the original pin hole.
Yes, and it's Allen screwed.
The bottom? Okay.
Yeah, there's an Allen screw that goes through the bottom. There's a plate, a metal plate, and with washers, you have the washers on the Allen screw. The screw comes up and marries this retainer that sits on top of the bridge now. And then the ball hooks into the back of this pin or this retainer and just goes right over top of the bridge. So you never insert the string into the guitar.
Right.
But the tone transfer is insane because now all 6 pins are connected with this metal bracket underneath. They're all screwed very tightly to the bridge the piece of ebony or rosewood, whatever they use for the bridge on the acoustic. And it just ties it all together and it rings like a bell, and it just, the sustain and the clarity is what is amazing. It brings like the high end kind of comes out, but you don't lose your low end.
Nice.
And it's really balanced and it's loud. I don't know what it does, but it somehow transfers all this vibration and it projects it very well. So now, like my electric, I can string the thing in like 3 minutes, the whole guitar, which is a godsend. But, I've read some reviews, and I think you have too, on these pins. And
on the power pins.
Yeah, and there is a guy took like, mic'd it up, he did it all correct, and he put it like on, a scope. And he was like, oh my God, it was like a considerable difference of dynamic range and volume and everything. So
I'm glad you finally got those on. I totally forgot that you had gotten them last year. I should probably get a couple of, at least one set for an acoustic.
Yeah, man. I recommend it.
I'm glad you put them on and can review them like in person. It's cool.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, you kind of go, well, it'll make it easier to string up my acoustic. I don't need to pull that pin thing out, and the bridge won't get all tore up underneath. And
if nothing else, it makes it easier to string.
Yeah, and then I put it on, and I go, oh my God! It was like, this is amazing. Cool. I mean, it was like it was such a noticeable difference. And you know how you do it, right? Like you take 2 amps and you're A-B'ing them. You got to do the thing real quick so you can still kind of hear that tone in your head, so that way you're trying to do this reference. Right. This was so different that I was like, well, this sounds like a whole different guitar. I mean, it was like a brand new.
Wow. So there was nothing subtle about it.
Nothing at all. I mean, this is like one of the coolest things that I've seen that had such an impact to the actual instrument volume and tone that it's like every guitar manufacturer should be putting these on their acoustics because they literally will be that much bigger, if I had to describe it. Yeah, very cool. And hats off to him, man. I mean, it's just amazing.
And like I said, even if it did nothing but make it easier to string your guitar, like you don't need a pin puller anymore on the acoustic. Nothing is, nothing's grinding up against the bridge block and marring it or anything. I mean, that's all done. You don't need to do that anymore. And
if you go to Stuart McDonald, you can see videos in there where Dan Erlewine, he has to replace those because after years of that ball. Just pulling and gouging this hole underneath the bridge itself, you have to fix that. You have to plug it and you have to fix it.
Yeah. Also, I mean, they do make oversized pins because the holes get worn out after a while, and the pin won't hold the string anymore. That's done with these. That's so cool.
Yeah, and if you don't have a bridge pin puller, you can really screw up your bridge.
Oh yeah.
With guys use screwdrivers or change. He'll put like a penny under there. You can dent. And really, this eliminates that. Your guitar, you never have to do that again. There is 2 different sets, and they split the set. So, I'm sorry, 3. So, you got large for your bass strings, your A and your E. You got the medium for your D and your G. And then you got the small for the B and the E. So, it houses the string differently. There's a little gap, so it doesn't fly out. It's pretty cool. Yeah, man. I recommend it. Everybody check it out. You can go to f1pick.com. That's F as in Frank, 1, the number 1, pick.com. He's got some other inventions in here, man. This guy looks like he that's all he does. It's just constantly coming up with new ideas.
That's very cool. Well,
yeah.
I wish him luck on it, and I'm going to have to pick up a set for my acoustic
as
man. Well. So
yeah, I recommend
cool,
it.
Man.
Yeah. Hey, our good buddy Greg Marra. Yeah, he's got a band called Plenty Heavy.
Plenty Heavy, right?
Yeah, they're getting ready to release a new video single thing, and I got a sneak peek, and
nice.
of the actual audio, and I must say this is cool stuff. This is a guy who sings. That's something new now in music. So he sings, and the song is I think he gave it like a title, Pop Shred, right?
I love it.
And I went, well, that's kind of cool, because when it gets to the solo, the song's kind of light and airy, right? So it's rock, it's there. Keeps your attention. It's got a good hook to it. But when he gets to the solo, it's like, well, there you go. I mean, he just turns the heat right up. And it's not just burn to burn, he's not just shredding just to shred. It's musical, but it's nice. Greg. It's got a little.
That's a make or break, a lose or win for me. Is it musical?
Oh yeah,
and that's fantastic. I mean, that's where shred gets old for me. If it's just shred for shred's sake, it gets old. Yeah,
well, he's got a very creative mind in that sense. His, if you listen to any of his solo stuff, his instrumental stuff, you can tell very well thought out and very well executed. And like I said, not just ripping to rip. It's done right, and just a nice guy, and shared that with me. I was like, wow, man, thank you. I didn't even expect it, and I was like, dude, this is cool. And if the masses dig this, I think it can really help his band.
Cool, and it would be nice to be able to feature some good players in a pop sort of environment, a pop genre, because it will give guitar players more to do, more opportunities.
Hell yeah. And
awesome.
He did a very good job. So when that gets
can't wait to hear it, man.
Yeah, when that gets released, I will make sure it goes on our webpage, and you guys can check it out at ampsandaccesscast.com.
Nice.
And I forgot to tell you, with the all the social media out there, you got to check that out. And then, of course, right below our episode, we have our good buddy from up north,
Jason Saditas,
and he gives us
quick lick.
Anyway, you had something, right?
Nah.
Nah. Okay.
Yeah,
I got you.
I'll hit that one next time. I want to get to our guest.
Yeah, and before I got to do one little disclaimer before we get there. I apologize that we were short on time. There was a little miscommunique, but we did get a good bit of it, and I think he's going to come back on and give us a part 2 down the road.
Probably so. Yeah. Probably so, because we didn't touch on everything that I think all of us wanted to touch on.
No,
and there's more, because he's had quite a career in the music industry, and no slouch when it comes to playing ability. He's done some very cool stuff.
Oh yeah.
And you know what? I'm just going to let him get into the story. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come right back with our guest of the week. And I'd like to say the one and only, but he challenges this. But for right now, I'm going to say the one and only Mr. Andy Timmons.
Greetings, you crazy kids. Greg Koch here, fiendish molester of Telecasters and other six-stringed appendages. You are listening to Amps and Axes. Now dig it.
Okay, and we are back as promised with the guest of the week, the one, the only Mr. Andy Timmons. Andy, how are you?
I'm good, but I can't say the one and only. I found out on the internet a few years ago that there's another Andy Timmons, maybe in Nashville, maybe in North Carolina, but he's a country guitar player. And it kind of came up in a funny way. I had a friend that I was working with in the Olivia Newton-John group and said, I was with a guy on a session that said he just worked with Andy Timmons. Were you in Nashville? I went, no. Andy Timmons on the session. I went, wow, that's weird. Then it comes to come to find out that there's a cat out there. I think he's a country player. I forget the name of the band, but anyway, we finally got in touch via email or something somehow, and I said, well, dude, man, I hope you're sounding good because we got a rep to keep up here. We got.
That's too funny.
Well, we're not talking to that Andy Timmons.
No, we're talking to this one.
Exactly.
Whichever this one is.
Well,
One of the others. It's like, will the real Andy Timmons please stand up?
That's right.
I guess we can find out by the questions you ask and how I answer them. I don't know.
Well, there we go. Well, you know what? We'll start where I like to start with most of our guests. Yeah. And Andy, we're gonna jump in the Wayback Machine and go all the way back to get a little history on where Mr. Andy Timmons was born and raised and how you got into this wild, wacky, and wonderful music business. So give us a little history, man.
Born and raised are kind of two different situations. Where I was born in Scottsdale, Arizona, and lived there till I was about 5, and then my family moved to Evansville, Indiana. So I kind of consider that hometown essentially because I was there from the age of 5 to 19. But born in '63, and the fortunate thing for me was I had 3 older brothers, and we were all 4 years apart, with me being the youngest. So my oldest brother was 12 in 1963, and he was keen to buy all the British Invasion as things came out. So ground zero for me is Kinks, Dave Clark 5, and certainly Beatles. That's my upbringing. That's what I was around, and U.S. stuff too, like the Monkees and maybe Paul Revere and the Raiders type stuff. I should mention Herman's as well. I've been in touch with Peter Noon lately. I'm a huge fan.
Oh, nice.
And and so with the older brothers around, that was my education, and they all dabbled in a little bit of guitar. So there was always acoustic guitars around the house and lots of rock and roll. So it was just kind of the perfect learning experience for me. And I even by the age of 4 or 5, there's a picture of me out on the web now. I must have been 4 or 5 around that time, and I had a toy plastic guitar, and I'm on stage with this country band in Scottsdale. And it was Chuck Carter and the Kinsmen, and they had a record out at the time called Ship John B., which predated the Sloop John B. hit by the Beach Boys on Pet Sounds. Anyway, it was the first record I ever owned, and there's this picture of me. It's a really great black and white photo. The lead singer Chuck is playing this wonderful old Jaguar, and the lead guitar player's got a late 50s, Les Paul Jr. TV, just like, oh my God. So it just kind of went from there. I could play melodies on one string that early on, and eventually started just teaching myself chords from somebody gave me the back page of a Mel Bay chord, beginner book that had the chord diagrams, and that's all I needed. I'd seen my brothers play a little bit. They knew the basic cowboy chords, and I would mess around with that. And then the day I'll never forget being in my bedroom and strumming a D chord, and Every Picture Tells a Story was on by Rod Stewart. And the chord I played was the same chord on the record. I had made that correlation, like you could actually teach yourself songs. But that got the ball rolling, and Kiss Alive was out at the time, and that was my textbook. Once I figured out they were tuned down a half step, I was off and running. So, yeah.
Another Kiss. I don't want to use the word casualty or convert, but a lot of people have been influenced by Kiss that we find out. It's kind of the second generation of influence.
I think very much an age thing. If you were like 12, 13, they were the perfect group. Oh, yeah. And as a guitar player, I will say that Ace was really the perfect guy to learn from, because he just had this kind of nice bag of the British blues guys, just the blues licks, and played really, really well. They're very memorable parts and memorable solos. And for a kid learning by himself, it was. Thank God I didn't hear Yngwie first. I never would have played.
That makes all of us.
Well, it's funny that you say that because we've interviewed some younger players like Nita Strauss and all. And she was like, that's who I thought you had to learn from. So she started by learning Yngwie licks. And I was like, well, now it makes sense why you see these 13-year-olds burning, Dragon Force. And you're going, how in the world is this young person able to be at this level? And it's like, well, with all the tools and everything in front of them and putting the bar that high right out of the chute.
No doubt. And that's really it. That's evolution. That's just like,
yeah, man.
Oh, that's what's happening. That's the way you do it. So there's no preconception of difficulty.
It's kind of weird and scary.
Right. I mean, you don't know it's difficult if nobody tells you it is.
Yeah.
That's coming from a guy that's 53. I heard Yngwie when I was, older, not older, but whenever.
Sure.
When it was like, I'd already had, when Eddie Van Halen came along, that was the next level bar.
Yeah.
And then Yngwie really was the next guy. But then you talk to Paul Gilbert, and he was speeding up Yngwie licks to see what they would sound like.
Just because he could.
Yeah. Well, Paul, I think when the ship landed, Paul came off, and 10 years later, Guthrie Govan.
Yeah.
And then here we are.
Are certainly what I love about Paul and Guthrie both kind of have a similar character in that they're just fans, and they have such an appreciation of not just their niche. There's obviously with Guthrie especially the wide variety of things he's able to do.
Yeah.
But they're just very humble about it and very much still students. And that's the way I feel about myself. It's there's so much always to get your fingers and mind around. So it's always in a state of inspiration. There's no doubt. It's certainly now with the world in your back pocket, essentially. So it can be overwhelming, but at the same time, I find it infinitely inspiring. So.
Oh, for sure.
I'm just getting started. That's for sure.
Well, speaking of getting started. When did you really get started? Like when did you, speaking of learning and always a student, when did you learn enough to get a couple of people together and go, hey, let's make some music? When did that happen for Andy?
That happened when I was 13. I was, I was kind of just a bedroom player at that point, just playing, again, only playing along with records. But my brother Brian, who was 4 years older than I, had a friend that was his age that was a drummer named Glenn Gore. And Glenn had a gig, but needed to put a band together. He had somehow gotten the gig for this 8th grade graduation dance. It just happened to be my 8th grade graduation dance. Wow. And so, my brother Brian was like, well, I've been hearing my kid brother. He's playing all this Nugent and Foghat and Kiss and Rush and knows all the tunes. And so, he had a buddy that was a bass player that was even older than Glenn, Jim Gaines. And they invited me over to play, and the first song we played together was Bastille Day, of all things, or one of the Rush records. And so that my first gig was my own 8th grade graduation dance, power trio,
Whoa.
And they would have rather have had disco. We played 2112 and the city. I don't know. But I was scared to death, of course. I was a very shy kid, so my back was turned most of the time, acting like I was fiddling with the knobs of my grand acoustic 150 head and 412 cab.
And I was
rocking the
I was going to ask you what the rig was. So
the rig was it was the cousin of the drummer that I had owned this rig and sold it to me. I had a job working at the Lawndale barbershop sweeping hair every day after school, so I earned enough money to buy my first records that I bought with my own money, and my first gears. I graduated through the pawn shop table to higher price guitars. My first guitar was $12.95, and then graduated to the SG copy. Then finally got a really cool Electro Les Paul copy, cream Electro Les Paul with a maple neck bolt-on. Later to find that it was made at the Fujigen factory where the Ibanez lawsuit guitars were made.
Nice.
First guitar, so it was that and a fuzz face into that acoustic 150.
Nice. Now the Electros later on in the year you could put these packs in the guitar, and it was like a pedal.
Oh wow!
Yeah, brilliant idea. I remember Peter Frampton being in all the ads, and maybe one of the guys in Chicago. I mean, I never played one of those. Mine was just a straight up Les Paul copy, but really cool looking guitar. But that was my first gig, and that drummer and I stayed together for 7 years. That was my formative, all my club gigs, man. The first, I guess when I was about 15, we got a steady gig at the Red Baron Lounge at the Holiday Inn on Highway 41. And the first night, Born to Be Wild, and a fight broke out. I went, I guess this is what I'm in for.
Well, at least you didn't have the chicken wire like the Blues Brothers.
It was I don't want to say Southern Indiana's redneck, but you can see it from there. There was really an element of that. Okay, well, let's just call it for what it is. Yes, there's redneck there. So, a little bit of everything. But it was, I was lucky that I very early on got in with a bunch of older guys that were more experienced. And I had the ability to keep up. So I was getting live experience and very consistently since then. That's really, as we know as students, that if you're not applying what you're learning, it just kind of goes away pretty quickly. And that's certainly it's still that way for me. I can transcribe and learn all I want, but I'm not on a gig trying it out. It's just going to go away. So I was very fortunate that I was again having to teach myself. I was still self-taught until about the age of 16. So I was just learning everything by ear and strengthening that tool, which again is the most important tool we have as a musician, is your ability to recognize what's happening, not only with your part but everything else, and finding out where to fit in. So I look back on it now and realize I really had the best of all worlds. And then by the age of 16, I knew that this was going to be my career path, or at least it was my desire to be my career path. So I was reading, Guitar Player magazine with Tommy Tedesco's studio log and all that, and reading about Lukather and Carlton and then the session players. These guys know how to read, and they can play anything. So I sought out a local teacher in Evansville named Ron Pritchett. He was kind of like the guy that was known as the best teacher in town. And so it took me about several weeks to get the courage to even call, because I'm, again, a very shy person at that point, especially. Got the courage to call Ron, and he got me in after there was a waiting list, and got me in maybe a month later. And he started me off on the Oahu lesson. It was a very antiquated lesson series from probably the 40s, and it was like notes on the treble string. So I could learn how to read. But he saw that I could play, so he started teaching me changes to jazz standards, because he was a very, very good straight ahead jazz player in the style of Barney Kessel.
Nice. You mentioned his name. I could be mistaken, but I think his name has come up before.
Really?
Yeah, I'm almost sure that name sounded so familiar to me. Huh. It may have come up in an interview before.
It's a good possibility.
Ron Pritchett, yeah, he's been in Evansville since I'm guessing since the 50s, but he was in the Army in Fort Campbell, and I think at the same time that Stanley Turrentine was, so he played with Stanley back in those days. But really, really, really good, bluesy jazz player. So he turned me on to Kessel and Joe Pass, and was loaning me, Oscar Peterson records, and I was playing in this band, but I was starting to get educated as far as reading, but also getting my ears tuned to some other styles of stuff. And I just loved anything with a guitar in it. If I heard a country tune, or eventually when I started studying classical, my first 2 years of college, I absolutely loved it. I wanted to, figure out how, Segovia and Julian Bream and John Williams, how they were getting the stuff under their fingers. And I studied for 2 years with a guy named Renato Buturi at the University of Evansville. This is from 81 to 83 when I was still in Evansville. I was still taking lessons from Ron, and I was still playing with the group that became Taylor Bay, the Taylor Bay Band. So we were local heroes, playing the bigger gigs and taking jazz lessons and studying classical in college. So I was busy,
That is really cool.
Yeah, no, that is awesome.
We were gigging at least 3 nights a week, so.
Wow.
I had a schedule and working a day, somewhat of a day job. Yeah. So I'm thinking back now. It's like, how'd that work?
Well, I think because I'm almost 50, and that era, was like the greatest guitar players. I mean, you had the late 60s, but then through the 70s, there were some guys that were really, once Eddie Van Halen came out, it was like, once again, the bar was raised. Mm-hmm. And you got some really good rockers, Pat Travers and Ted Nugent. And, you just had those guys that were really rock and roll guys. And then, of course, Ace Frehley was like this guy that was not, Kiss had this bigger than life thing. And then Ace was this guy there, but he had a lot of iconic riffs in his playing. Mm-hmm. And,
really, it was just kind of those stocky,
Yeah.
I would kind of compare him to Slash in a way, at least as far as the generations go, because they never got the respect that I think they deserved.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing about it though is that we didn't have all the tools that we have today, so you had to develop the ear. You had to figure those things out, and it made you a better player, of course.
Oh, for sure.
That's a huge point, because that is one thing that's solidly lacking is the ear.
Oh yeah.
And the way that because people are getting a lot of their information through their eyes and not their ears, Mm-hmm. So the mechanics are there, the visuals are there, but the placement and the feel and the sound is what's lacking, and it's because of exactly that. There's almost too much information available,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that not to take away from the younger generation that actually goes to those tools. But
No. I go to them too. Don't get me wrong. I'm not negating them. It's about a balance.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of the feel disappears in some of the newer styles of music that we hear.
Right.
Where we go, God, that guy's amazing. He's playing, he played this passage. It almost seems like you have to do it on a computer.
Exactly, yeah.
But the feel part kind of got lost somewhere in the shuffle. Mm-hmm. And that's why
I believe that speed necessarily sacrifices feel. I mean, we keep bringing up his name, but to get thrown under the bus in that way. Oh, he's all speed and technique, and there's no feel. But he's got a huge, beautiful, soulful feel. If you hear him down, and he decides to, it's like, oh, do that! Oh my God! And again, I never. I love his playing, and I appreciate what he does. But as a listener, it's like it would grow old for me pretty quickly. I can dig a few tunes, but I'm gonna move on eventually, because it's stylistically he hasn't moved much at all, right? So, but I did go see him live maybe 2 or 3 years ago here in Dallas. I was kind of like, I might not dig it, I might get bored, but I should go. This guy's iconic. He really is one of the greatest players ever on the instrument, and I owe it to myself to go. And it was by far easily one of the greatest guitar performances I've ever seen. I thought it could have been silly. He's my age, he's going to be out there in the spandex and the Marshalls, and so it could be a little sticky. But the thing that immediately hit me, and it's when you see footage of Stevie Ray Vaughan play, I feel the same thing, where it's real. It's complete belief and conviction in what he's doing. There's nothing. You would think that could be a pretentious situation, but I didn't feel pretension in one bit. It was over the top. It was amazing. I can't say enough good about it. I really enjoyed it.
I agree with you. I can easily get bored with it after a few songs, and I have. Mm-hmm. But live, the execution is flawless
and an insane vibrato.
Yeah,
I mean that guy, and he does it all on a 21 fret Strat. Mm-hmm.
It's a vibrato. No, it is truly great. The tone is great. And, but I will say it's the first gig I went to, and the show was over. I went, that was great, and I turned around and I went home.
Well, I got to see him when he was in Alcatraz.
Oh wow!
I got to see 19-year-old Yngwie Malmsteen.
Wow,
he was like a road flare. Like you couldn't go near it. You could have took him and stuck him in a bucket of water and he'd still be burning. But it was. You could see that he just had that thing, that vibrato is just absolutely insane. I
enjoyed too. After that experience, he had just released an autobiography called Relentless. And I'm a nut for biographies, and especially autobiographies. So just about anybody in the music business, I'll read them. It's always interesting to find people's story, and his was very revealing. He's obviously had quite a reputation about being difficult, and I'd been around him a couple times where it wasn't pleasant. And that's not an uncommon experience that I've heard from other people. And again, that's just, it's the rep that's out there. But you read the book and it doesn't excuse, treating human beings badly, but you kind of understand where it comes from a bit, But that's the point I was making, where the show was over and I turned around and went home. Anybody else, I'd go, man, let's go say hey. He said, why ruin the mystique of a great show? Why, So I don't think he just may be the type of person that's just not comfortable around other folks or only certain people. And, I can see that. That's cool. So I can love from afar.
Well, there you go. But, this is not the Yngwie show. This is the Andy Timmons show. So,
yes.
I want to get back into, you were doing you had 3 nights a week that you were playing and, working a day job and everything. When did, what you considered something big hit? When did you first, okay, I'm going out as a professional now?
Man, I don't think there was ever... I mean, certainly when I got the gig with Danger in 88, 89, that was my first gig maybe on the national or international level.
Okay.
But before then, there was just never a time of not gigging. So I was, again, really from the age of 13, there was always a band and there was always gigs. So in that regard, I see where I was very fortunate that things just worked out the way they worked out. When I left Evansville and left Taylor Bay, we could have been signed. I was in communication with a bunch of labels, and we had some really nice. We had one LP out and an EP that was, really getting the major label attention. So we kind of brushed, over that threshold at one point. It just didn't work out, and I was younger and more motivated. Everybody else was starting to settle down and have families, and I could see where I just kind of needed to move on. And I'd heard about Miami and where Matheny had been there and the Dregs formed there, and so I thought this is where I want to be, and managed to get in just auditioning by cassette tape that somehow got accepted. But not long after getting down there, I got a 6-night-a-week top 40 gig.
Wow.
And that's the best. I mean, in the level of playing in that school, there was just so many really, really happening players, and we are all inspired by each other. And then I was on the gig 6 nights a week, like I said, with the ability to try my new Charlie Parker licks on Madonna Borderline.
Now, you mentioned school. You mentioned Miami. You mentioned school.
That's right, University of Miami.
Oh, University of Miami. Okay.
Pretty well known for its jazz department down there. So that's where I ended up for my 3rd and 4th year into college before moving to Texas. I hooked up with a bass player named Steve Bailey down there and a drummer named Ray Brinker. Ray and Steve had gone to school at North Texas State University in Denton, Texas. And so Ray wanted to form a rock band. I had a year to go to graduate, but I thought, okay, this guy's offering me he had a backer that was, backing this band, and we could move to Texas, form a band, and do a record, which is what we did. We independently produced and released, and didn't do much, but it was a great experience with some great players. That's what got me to Texas. But not long after that, I left that group and formed the Andy Timmons band, and that first demo tape is what made the rounds and got me initially an audition with a new group that Jonathan Kane and John Waite were forming that turned out to be Bad English.
Oh, wow.
So I auditioned for that gig and got the gig. Now, Neil Sean had done the demos, but declined to do the record because he had just gotten a solo deal with Columbia. But then I'd done the audition, got the gig, went out for a trial week in LA to rehearse, and in the middle of that week, Neil called him back saying, well, maybe I'm reconsidering this gig, So they told me, well, we're going to spend a week with Neil now and see how it goes. So I kind of knew at that point that, half a journey together or some kid from Texas. But it was right after that the same guy that hooked me up with that audition, a guy named Buddy Blaze with Kramer Guitars.
Yeah.
Knew these guys, Danger out of New York, that were looking for a guitar player. They'd been signed and actually had done their first record and needed a guy to join the band and do the videos and go on the road. And that's how that happened. I sent him a cassette tape and went up and auditioned. And that was my first foray into, something that was on a major label, which was kind of always the holy grail, mysterious, God, man, to be in a signed band, And after that, the 3-4 years I was in there, I realized, well, that's not what I was wanting to do. That's what I wanted. But I'm glad I got the experience. But it was at that same time I had offered to join Tower of Power.
Oh, wow.
They had come through. I knew the horn player, Steve Grove, in the band, who I'd gone to school with in Miami. They came through Dallas and were, looking for a guitar player because their guy was leaving to go to Laura Branigan's gig. And so I went out and sat in at a gig, and it went great. And they talked to me about coming out and joining the band. But it was right when I got that offer from Danger Danger, and I was just, fork in the road, Musically, I guess maybe at the time Tower of Power might have been more what I was looking for, but you get drawn by that. Well, this is a rock thing, and I might get more exposure, and so it kind of went down that path. I would have been happier with a call from Miles Davis to.
I guess so.
Well, to let you know, I saw you guys at Painter's Mill in Maryland here. Extreme opened up for them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was Extreme and Danger toured in 1990. It was right before More Than Words broke, so we were kind of on the same level, and we were swapping every night who was headlining. It was a great
Nice.
tour. I really enjoyed. And we jam with Nuno every night, and they were really, really, really good guys. It was great to see them burst out like they did after that single broke. Painter's Mill, remind me, where is that?
That is in Owings Mills, Maryland.
That's why I couldn't remember. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a long time, but I remember the name Painter's Mill. I just couldn't remember where that was.
Yeah, it burned to the ground, and it's
yeah.
a BJ's wholesale now.
Yeah.
That's what kind of business it is, but okay.
That was a great club, man. I saw a lot of people there.
You could actually play in the round there.
Yeah.
And
I saw like Gentle Giant in the round there.
Yeah.
I saw the Police first tour there.
It's a shame that the place went away, and
yeah.
it was a fraud thing. It was an insurance scam. Mm-hmm. They burned the place to the ground because they could not. It was kind of off of the beaten path. It wasn't Baltimore. It was West Baltimore, Northwest. Right. And it just never. It was like hard to find.
Well, if you didn't know where it was.
If you didn't know where it was, and you had to go
Great
down this
venue, though.
long
Great
road. Yeah, it was a really cool venue in this weird area.
And the reason I remember that now that I'm realizing where it was, I had visited the Paul Reed Smith factory that day, and took with me. They had a prototype of, remember that solid state amp they made right then?
Yeah, the harmonic generator.
I think that I played that amp that night at that gig. Believe it or not, I think I tried it out. I don't think it worked for me, but I remember it being kind of cool. But I remember that. I remember that gig, man. Wow.
I knew a guy who had one of those amps, and he said it worked best when you just turned everything all the way up.
I don't doubt it.
Thing for a minute there, but I think Paul's gone on to do well.
Yeah, he's made a couple more guitars and a few amps lately.
Yeah, I think he's okay.
Yeah. No, I remember that amp. It was at that point it was the best solid state amp that I had heard.
No doubt.
Because my friend,
there's things I really love about solid state. When I'm playing like clean jazz, I really prefer solid state. It's just a much more immediate attack. I don't really do distortion through that, but I did a clinic tour once in 1993 with Sean Lane, and he was playing these Holmes amps. I don't know if you've ever heard of Holmes. HOLMES, and they were solid state, and he had two Holmes running in stereo. And maybe it was a Westbury distortion box, which is a tube-driven distortion box, and three DD3s set at different delay tempos to kind of spread out. He would like the outer two, I think, were like, just within the 30 to 40 millisecond air, so it just kind of made this wide. It was Eric Johnson-y type tone with a guitar where the nines were just on the deck. Just the lowest action. But what an amazing experience that was. Because if I've hung and played with some pretty brilliant people, that may be the genius that I've ever worked with, man. I tell you what,
Sean Lane is without. He was amazing. He was
just on every level. I mean, what he could do on guitar, he could do on drums and keyboards. And,
really?
But his knowledge, and not just, his pop and classical and jazz knowledge was very deep, and we had some amazing discussions. But he was well read on just about anything artistic, architecture and film and art. I was blown away with the guy. We laughed so much. We had a great time.
Yeah, he was one of the most amazing unknown guys. And you had to dig deep to know who he was back then. And he passed away. When did he pass away?
10 years now, I think.
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe at least, what is this? Yeah, maybe later 90s, or my time frame is not always that accurate. So it could have been late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Obviously, way too young. Just very sad. But so we did that clinic tour. We played what was called the Axe Attack at NAMM earlier that 93, and then I had a brother that lived in Memphis that was a teacher at the university there, and so I would go through to visit. And Sean still lived there, so we visited a couple times at his house. And a really, really sweet guy. We always made time to hang whenever we saw each other at NAMM or whatever. But that's the beauty of YouTube. So you can see guys like Ted Green and Sean Lane, and these guys that never attained the fame that they deserved. But there's luckily a wealth of video documents of these guys playing, man, and it's just incredible.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
You put him in the Jason Becker category.
Oh wow.
Well, yeah, I guess in a way.
Just crazy virtuoso kind of guy. Just off, You see a Paul Gilbert, you see an Ingve, and then you see Sean Lane, and you go, there's this other whole
He's
other
another
level.
one of those kind of guys.
Yeah, exactly.
And Holdsworth too, where the guy is just so advanced, sometimes to his own detriment, I think, because the more advanced harmonically guys can get, or even with the speed thing, it can alienate some of the audience. There's always needs to be some level of connectivity, and certainly Alan is capable of it. You hear some of the playing he did on those Jean-Luc Ponty records, and it's just heartbreakingly beautiful, and Sean too. But there was, they would obviously delve into their genius brains and leave a lot of people behind, I think,
Oh, for sure. Sure.
That can be hard for that artist to deal with. I look at Brian Wilson and how far ahead he was in the mid 60s. After Pet Sounds, he went in to do the Smile record, and the band and the label fought it because they didn't get it. It just now came out 4 years ago, and won record of the year. It just it took that for people to catch up and get it. You know what I mean? So it can be a burden, that level of virtuosity, that level of genius. That can be tough to deal with. I think.
Yeah, I had just seen a little video snippet, and it was part of a Chick Corea thing, like I think it was a days long birthday bash or something, and McLaughlin was
in New York.
Yeah, and McLaughlin was his guitar player, and he actually looks at the audience at one point. He goes, those notes that you think were wrong, they're not.
Well,
yeah, it's sometimes you got to explain it. It's like, no,
all in the ear of the beholder, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I've said that same thing about like John Petrucci. Does it bore the piss out of him to play in 4/4? And I understand. He's got that brain, right? Mm-hmm. And he's just crazy advanced. But it's like, does he lose the audience?
Yeah.
It's almost like almost like shooting yourself a little, or like you keep cutting yourself over and over because you're like, well, I can take this, but the guy next to you is like going, hey, I've just thrown up 5 times. You got to stop.
I Dream Theater, John. I think they've done great. They tend to working, and it needs to be more accessible, maybe always. But that was the thing I enjoyed about doing the Protocol records recently with Simon Phillips, because it would take me out of my normal musical mindset, and obviously he's quite crafty with the odd time signatures, and it's a challenge for me. I have to think, and that's not always my favorite thing to do. When it comes to music, sometimes I'd rather let things flow and channel, but I really enjoyed exercising that part of my musical brain and abilities because of that, because I do enjoy it. And he writes very musical things, even though they may be in 15, 16, or 11, 16. I mean, it just
that's a little tough to do.
A bit more. Yeah, and it just changes your natural phrasing a little bit. But again, very proud of those last couple of records we did for those reasons. But then I go back and I play in my music, which tends to be more straight ahead, time signature wise.
And you had mentioned you dropped Eric Johnson's name a little while back, and I can definitely hear some of that in your playing. Just the the voicings of a lot of chording that you do and some runs and things. I can tell there's some influence there, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, he's, for me, certainly sonically set the bar quite a bit. When we set out to do the Resolution record, you know, when we pared everything down to no overdubs and just one guitar tone, one track on each song, you know, we really had to go down that path. This, you know, you couldn't thicken things up by doubling or having rhythm guitars. And so, I mean, he, to me, though, is the master of that. And yeah, he's always been an influence, but for me, a dangerous guy to listen to for what you're talking about. You start to phrase like that, it's immediately noticeable. But no, he's a huge hero for me. And again, especially sonically, and just the hard work that he's done to achieve the tones that he has, and obviously, and the virtuosity too. But yeah, a major influence, no doubt about it.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of tones, let's just go back a little bit. I want to talk gear for a little bit here because we do that sometimes. But let's go back to like Danger that era. Let's go from there. What was your rig like at that point, and how has it changed over time? And are you still real, or have you gotten totally virtual? Or let's get into that a little.
Not a virtual fan at all. So okay. we'll just say that. But okay, so back to Danger. That my first touring rig was a Rockmaster preamp, and there's a very bad full-page PV ad from that time period with me with very bad hairspray hair and pants. It looked like a bad transvestite. It's horrible. Rockmaster preamp to a PV power amp and PV cabs. So that was kind of my first amp endorsement, and they were a cool company. I'm sure still are, but at that time they had a guy named James Brown. That was their
James well. Yeah, we've had him on, and he's a good guy.
Electronics guy. Well, tell him I said, hey, I haven't seen him in years, but he helped customize the head for. They had a Triumph 60 head that I was using also that he had highly modified for me. I went down and visited, and so there was kind of some PV stuff early on. Then when the second record came out, I had a Marshall preamp. Was it the 9001 or 9002? I forget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
There was
9001, I think.
And was like the Power Amp 9002 or something?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. One way was one way and the other.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Using that and a Tube Screamer into a PV Profex into their Power Amps, and that might have been my later Danger rig. But after that, it was kind of, man, every gig was different as far as doing my own gigs and doing recordings. I mean, there's been such a variety of things, you know. My main amp for the last 10 years has been the Mesa Lone Star, which I still love. Using that quite a bit. Using the clean channel with a variety of pedals, and also that lead tone is nice. Cool. But even before then, everything. There was that. Remember the ADA preamp back in the day, the MP1.
MP1, sure.
I had two of them.
I found mine. I'm like, the memory battery has died, so I got to replace that. But I plugged it in. It's like, fucking sounds cool, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm still an amp guy. You mentioned the virtual thing. I haven't played anything that I think feels right, but I'm sure eventually they'll get that together. I have a prototype in my studio right now that I'm playing through, which is a Triple Crown that Mesa put out. Not that that's virtual, but it's got the cab clone, you know, a direct out that I'm checking out.
Okay.
It sounds really good. I'm like kind of impressed with that technology, you know. And I've had Axe-Effects and pods and all that, and I used some of those live when I was playing. I worked with Olivia Newton-John for about 15 years, and there were some tours where it was either going to be with orchestras the whole time, or we were going to be traveling in different country every day, and I couldn't take my Mesa amp. So sometimes just having a fly rig was something that would run direct. And I see the beauty of that, but it just never felt or sounded right to me. But I'm sure that technology will come along at some point. But for me, I like earning it. I like, having the amp and putting the mic on the speaker and finding the sweet spot. And
studio-wise, same thing for you? Moving air, or do you?
Always. I mean, always. This even just hooking up this cab clone yesterday is the first time that I've even entertained that in a long time. I did used to use a Hughes and Kettner Tube Man. It was a rack unit that went direct. It actually used to sound really good. That I would use for jingle sessions and stuff like that. But when anything for my own records has always been the amps. There's in my very first record called Ear Ecstasy that was like from 94, 95, my first post Danger solo release. There were tracks on there that I thought were demos that, I'd do the rhythm tracks and I'd blow a quick lead track down with my Zoom, my little 9002. That's very similar in number. But just kind of, it was like kind of better than a rock, but not much. But, it had a lead tone you could play. Okay, great. And that, by the time I circulated the demos and had some friends, like there was a guy, Reb Beach from Winger, that was a good friend of mine. So what do you mean these are demos? This is your record. This sounds great. Put this out. And I kind of saw the beauty to it because I didn't think I was making a record. I was just kind of off the cuff and everything was fresh. And I kind of realized I probably can't beat the vibe of that, so I just kind of went with it. But
yeah, well, sometimes people will tell you we did 13 tracks. We took the first one. Yeah. We did it 15 times. Took the first one.
That's why I say practice is important so you don't suck on the first take, because then you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
And you can improve little things. And but yeah, if it's going to be an improvised track, it's always going to feel best. It's always going to have a fresher thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I came up with that mentality because I read about Lukather and Carlton, and they go in, they do 1, maybe 2 takes. If it takes more than that, just tell them you'll try it tomorrow. Things like that. So even when I got, my first major label recording gig was that first Danger record. They had completed the record and mixed it, but they weren't happy with the mixes, so they hired a guy named Mike Stone. If you're familiar with Mike Stone, he did Queen records and Journey records. He was a big guy in the 70s and 80s. And so they had hired him to do the mixes. But then I show up one day, and they were going to let me come in and recut a couple of solos, I think just to kind of make me feel more part of the project. Mike wasn't happy about it because he just got out of rehab, and he was ready. He didn't want to deal with a guitar player. I think really what I'm thinking. I'm thinking Neil Sean, Brian May. God, man, I'm in great company here, right? And so there was a song called "Boys Will Be Boys." I had my Kramer Sustainer guitar and a rented rig from Andy Brower. I think it was a Kasha preamp and some kind of power amp. Got a tone up, first take, do the solo. Maybe I tried a second one. No, that song was the first take. I did the take, and I look at Mike like, oh fuck, man, was that okay? And he looks at me and kind of his eyes kind of rolling, going, yeah, mate, everybody gets it on the first take. And that's the take we kept it, but it actually took me years to realize, that, I would think that Brian May might have taken a while to get some of those solos the way he wanted them.
Oh,
you know what
sure.
I mean? I don't know for sure, but some of those things might have taken a while. Of course, my own stuff later years. Of course, I'll spend days and weeks just it wasn't quite right. Let me try it again tomorrow.
I mean, with the May stuff, there's just so many overdubs. The first one might be there, but also there's 6 other ones that are on top of it. Just to get all the harmonies. But
and that doesn't negate the beauty, and that's certainly how I eventually ended up working on my own stuff when I had the time to do that. But that day, sitting in that spot, I'm recording on a major label record. I'm sitting next to Mike Stone. This better be fucking good. And I got on the first take. I lived up to my own expectations anyway. It may not have been anybody else's, but that's the kind of pressure in that situation that you kind of have on yourself, and maybe the situation does call for that. And in sessions I do for other people, which are a lot fewer and far between these days, but there are studios in Dallas that I do work at occasionally, but it tends to be more jingle stuff than record stuff.
You actually dropped a couple of solos on some work by a good friend of mine, Joe Macri. You did some stuff on King Friday.
I did. I don't remember honestly. I don't remember what turned out of the session. I need to go back and listen. But meeting Joe was really cool, and that was one of those sessions where I'd gone in, to work at this particular studio I hadn't done much work at because it was like a video post-production type place. But the guy there was hired me to play on play that funky music or pick up the pieces. It was a 70s cover, right? Mm-hmm. And I did this whole session with the engineer having a great time, and as I'm loading out, the assistants helped me load out my gear to my car. And he goes to me, well, that guy was in a band called Crack the Sky. I went, you gotta be fucking kidding me. I had no idea who I was working with because I had a brother, older brother that had all the Crack the Sky stuff. Especially there's a particular live album that had I'm the Walrus on it and Surf City, all their better known tunes that I came to realize. But my favorite thing about that record is the intro. The guy goes, "This band has come all the way down from an acid trip just to play for you."
I remember that.
Right back in, and I go to Joe and I do that same stick. "This band has come all the way down," and so he about fell over. So you just never know. And so then occasionally I would do sessions for him, years later at different studios. And then he came and asked me to be part of that. So I do, those type of things on occasion. Luckily now I'm so busy with my own thing and stuff. I don't accept as much outside work, but occasionally something comes down the pipeline that sounds like fun, and I'll do it.
Cool, man.
Yeah, no, but Joe is a great guy, and I love crossing paths with him.
Yeah.
Whenever.
Yeah, they're all good friends. I've had the opportunity to play with most of them, and
Nice.
Matter of fact, when they were going to take King Friday out, they had asked me to be the guitarist in King Friday, and the schedules just didn't work out. But he's going, yeah, you got to learn this and this. This is Andy Timmons, and I went, oh, great.
Over good. I don't remember what I did.
Oh no, it's great shit, man. It's great shit. So,
all right, cool.
But yeah, we got to unfortunately cut this short. We could keep going. There's a lot of other
we'll
stuff
have to do this again.
Yeah, we'll definitely do it again. But this Mick's got to roll. But Andy, anything you want to promote? Any new releases? Any touring? What are you doing right now that you want the people to know?
Now, just the Andy Timmons Band released "Theme from a Perfect World," which is our newest CD that came out I think in October.
Great album.
Yeah, thank you. So that's our most recent release. It's top seller on CD Baby. I was happy to find out today. So it's doing really well, and there'll be a feature in the new vintage guitar and guitar player coming up soon. But right now I'm off the road for a few months, and I've got a new subscription lesson site that's going to be launching in mid-February called Guitar Experience.
Sweet.
So it'll be Andy Timmons Guitar Experience, just with an X, no E. And it's going to be, playthroughs of all my tunes, that we're going to add over time. But a lot of other general tutorial type things, but also a wealth of stuff from my career. There's lots of unreleased, just bootleg videos from, I have hundreds of hours of tape and video that we're going to put up on there. And,
nice.
And I'm going to have a photo gallery where I've got all these photos that I've taken with everybody that I've met over the years. And instead of just putting up a photo and putting, it's me with Ringo and, blah, blah, blah. But I'm going to do a narrative for each of them and tell the story, how,
cool.
how long I stalked Ringo before meeting him. God, 7 different shows. It's not easy meeting a Beatle, trust me. There's so many stories that I want to tell while I still remember them. So there's going to be a lot of material for the casual fan, a lot of material for beginning players, and then a lot of material for advanced players. People that really want to get to the nuts and bolts of each of my songs. They're all going to be transcribed. They're all going to be filmed of me playing them, and I'm going to give a very, very in-depth, step-by-step, each lick and how where it comes from, what's going on.
Nice.
There's going to be a jazz standard of the month. I'll be playing a lot of jazz.
Sounds really interesting, man. Our listeners definitely got to check this out when it happens.
What's the URL for that?
Just Guitar Experience. So GUITAR X PERINCE.
Okay,
so,
well that will live out on our website in
perpetuity
with your Andy Timmons site.
Yes, we'll put them both up.
And they will sit there in the archives. You can always go back, click on that, and that'll take you out to his sites, and you can check it out, man.
For sure, man. Andy, it's been a blast.
Yeah, man.
Let's do part 2. I'm sure there's a lot more we can chat about. I know I went on about other players more than me, but I kind of like about other players more than me. Yeah, man, anytime, man. Enjoyed the chat.
All right, Andy, thank you so very much, man. Have a great rest of the day, and much success with everything you got going now and everything in the future, my friend.
Be out at NAMM?
I'm going to be there for about a day and a half. Where are you going to be?
Friday, I'll be at the JHS booth doing a demo of my AT pedal, and then Saturday night we're doing the X Jam. It's me, Tony McAlpine, Mike Keneally, Teddy Kumpel, Travis Larson band.
Damn, I'll be flying home by then, but I'm going to try to catch you Friday.
Lettieri from Snarky Puppy. All right, please come by Friday and say hey.
I will, Andy. Take care, man. Thank you.
And there you have the story, or most of it.
Yeah, and I apologize getting out of here. I gotta go very far away.
Yeah, there was a little mix up on the time because the time zones got skewed a little bit. But anyway, a great interview, great guy. Hopefully we'll have him on again.
Oh, we definitely will.
We definitely should. That was so funny that he, the story about him meeting our friend Joe Mack from Crack the Sky. It was like, wow,
Yeah, how about
that band? Like, not a lot of people know that band. The people that do know that band and know what they did, they're like lifelong fans of the band.
Pretty crazy, huh?
To find out that he's one of them, it's just so cool.
That was the weirdest thing. I mean, it's like we're popping along, you mention it, and then boom, and it was like, really? Like that was so strange. I did not expect that whatsoever.
Yeah, it was very cool. That was very cool.
Yeah, very cool dude too, man.
Yeah, and they do, both of them, Joe and Andy, do a lot of studio work, and it's not just making music. They're doing jingles and soundtracks and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, that's the life of a studio guy.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys, not a shredder per se. Very melodic, very thought out. Once again, just one of those guys. That gets it done the right way.
Absolutely,
unreal.
Absolutely.
So until next time, my friend.
Because there might be a next time with him.
I'm Mick Marcelino, and you're?
I'm still Jeff Bober.
And we're always saying,
onward.
Be sure and follow the show on Twitter @AmpsandAxes. Also, make sure you like the show on Facebook. For news, comments, and everything else, visit the webpage ampsandaxescast.com. Thanks for listening.